Good morning to you. I'm going to talk to you about an industrial model, sustainable world. And I have a bit of a challenge. I would like to just take one case and go to the detail of all the manufacturing, the nuts and bolts. And then I'm challenged to give you 10 different cases so that you get wildly inspired and just realize that a lot is happening behind the scenes. But to me, it's very important that the original picture of the orangutan, it's really what marked me in my life. Do you know the brand name Ecover? Well, that's me. So I created Ecover. It was a quasi-bankrupt company. And my decision was that if I was going to get into manufacturing, I was going to change the way manufacturing was done. I had no experience, I have no right to be in manufacturing, as the bankers told me when I discussed them financing. And they said, you have no experience in manufacturing. I know you're great in media, you know you're great in this and database development, but this you don't know, so don't do it. And I said, but that's the only reason why I can innovate. I can do fundamentally different. So I decided to get into the detergents business and take on Procter & Gamble. Now, how much would you bet on me? Take on Unilever, take on Henkel. The result is, though, that I did take 3% of the market share without advertising. And it's still a case at Harvard Business School in INSEAD. How do you succeed in taking 3% market share without advertising? And the beautiful thing is they do not know how to respond when someone takes market share without advertising. It was, for me, a big shift because I decided to create a factory that hadn't been built before. It was a zero-emissions factory, a factory without any wastes in the air, solid, or in the water. I was forced by the Belgian government to have a connection to the sewage system, but I never used it. We were taking care of it ourselves. Why? Because we had the biggest grass roof in modern history in an industrial building, and we were recycling all water on our roof. We're a bio-based company. We can put things on grass. Grass grows when you have bio-based materials. And so we had 37 birds spotted on our rooftop. And when people visited us, we were inviting them to plant a flower on the roof. Now, when people plant a flower on the roof, I can guarantee you 22 years later, they're still buying your product. It's the connection between the heart and the products and the manufacturing, which hardly happens. But then I was in Indonesia because I became one of the biggest buyers of palm oil. And in Indonesia, I realized this. There you have the palm plantation, and there you have the forest. Here is where the orangutan lives. There is where he's getting chased away. So I realized the hard way that even though I was considered a guru in green business and green manufacturing, I was destroying the rainforests in Indonesia. And at that moment, you have to make an ethical decision. Am I going to do less bad? Am I going to reduce my impact? Or if I'm saying less bad is like stealing less. Stealing is stealing, right? Stealing less is still stealing. Can I cut less trees? Can I destroy less forests? Or do I come to the conclusion, I can't do it? And so that is the basis of zero emissions, zero waste, blue economy. Biodegradable palm oil is not sustainable. I learned the hard way that biodegradability is not sustainability. We have many things that are biodegradable, they're absolutely unsustainable. And this is what we call today an empty forest. The only thing that stands there is a tree. For the rest, nothing is tolerated. And therefore, the key thing is that when I realized that I was building up great business, let's not forget, Ecover today is a $140 million business. When I took it over, it was $1 million. Fast growth, fast development, manufacturing systems all changed. I was the first one to apply a vortex system for blending detergents. In a vortex, you can blend a detergent within 3 minutes, whereas industry standard today is still blending 45 to 50 minutes. I don't get it. What did they learn at university? I mean, universities don't teach vortices. Why not? I mean, if you really want to go for energy efficiency, you got to do that. But if you don't have your whole system right, you really don't get your production in order. Jean-Paul Sartre would say, I failed. Well, he would say it in French, of course. He would not say it in English. But I'm more of the philosophy of Benjamin Franklin. That says, I never fail. I only found 10,000 ways that didn't work. And I think this is really what my organization is about. I have 3,000 researchers worldwide who contribute continuously. We're always searching for new ways. But out of the 500 ideas we get every month, one will work. That means the other 499, did they fail? No, we just figured out they didn't work. And I think it's very important with my experience of eCover that we need to connect the heart to the engineering. If you are not connecting your heart and your soul and your gut feelings to the engineering, ladies and gentlemen, we're not going to have breakthroughs in innovation. And so that brings me back to the origin of man. When man went from this to this, very risky venture. Because on 2 feet, you're slower, less stable. But you get your hands free. And now you have your hands free, what can you do? Carry food. So when you can carry food, you can come home and you can bring food to everyone else. And then came the greatest invention in modern history. No, it's not the wheel. It's the bag. Louis Vuitton remembers this very well. The bag was invented. It meant for the first time human beings had a bag and they could stuff it with food. That means they could come home with 15 times more food than they could ever eat themselves. And what do you think happens when you come home and you bring food? Daddy will love you. It's an amazing development in the mindset because there's a risk taken, there is a reward given. Human beings are driven by a new discovery of rewards. And the reward is love and appreciation. Something different than we have today from venture funds or hedge funds. And I think it's important to remind you of that because that is how I got to think differently about manufacturing. And we need to do it very differently because, you know, the Neanderthal. Which one is the present brain and which one is the Neanderthal? This is the Neanderthal. Ladies and gentlemen, do you realize that our brain has shrunk 20% in 10,000 years? Do we realize that? Now, of course, there are many hypotheses that are being proposed on why is our brain shrinking. But one is definitely the lack of deep emotional experiences. Our brain has developed first and foremost because of the emotional experiences. We could sing and dance before we could talk. That's why it's good to do tango. But what is second most important, we completely changed our food 10,000 years ago. We went for milk and for wheat. We want lactose and gluten, and that shrinks our brain. And we know it. The science is there. More than 100 scientifically published articles, peer group reviewed, including Nature and Science magazine, and we don't care. We keep on producing food the way we have been doing for the past 50 years, so we're certain our brain keeps on shrinking. Do I reach you in your heart? I mean, we have to realize that the way we're going about things is not right. So we need to change the business model. My focus is how to change the business model. I'm not here to say whatever was done is bad. I'm here to say there is an opportunity to do much better. I don't want to do less bad. I want to do much better. And this must be the driving force for innovations for years to come. But we're stuck. We're stuck with this that they keep on teaching every MBA around the world. The core business model. I mean, I have never seen something as stupid and as ridiculous as this opportunity to force everyone to do one thing only. And let me take you a metaphor. The panda. What's happening to the panda? It's dying. Why is the panda dying? Well, people are encroaching on its land. Encroaching on the land, it doesn't have any more bamboo. Since there's no bamboo, it's dying, so it needs government protection. Okay. Why doesn't the panda change food? Have you ever asked that question? I mean, if the panda were to say, I'm going to eat something else than bamboo because it's not available anymore, what would happen to the panda? Thriving, happy. But the panda says, I will only eat bamboo. If there's no bamboo, I'd rather die. So the government protect me. Sounds like business today. We only do this, and if we can't do this, then government protect me. I think it's about time we start behaving like this creature, the cockroach. Cockroaches eat whatever is around. They hide wherever they can hide. You kill them, you got another one coming. You kill 10 of them, they got another one coming. I mean, even if the government mandates to kill them, they can't kill them. They keep on living. They've been around for 100 million years. They will be around for 100 million years. The panda will not be here except in a zoo with artificial insemination because they even don't procreate anymore. Business needs to behave like cockroaches. Go for the cash flow where it is. Go for the raw materials where you can get it. Transform them into life, subsistence, resilience. What we've learned from the management philosophy of a cockroach family is resilience. Whatever happens, even a nuclear bomb drops, boop, 7 days later they're back. Amazing. And we think in management they are not an inspiration, they're disgusting. So, let me get into the projects, enough with the philosophy. Any innovation that needs to be done in order to move towards a transformation towards sustainability must have cash available. Don't ever think about finding money first. If you're going to find money first, you're never going to do anything serious. There is something that is called institutional technological lock-ins. That means people who are locked into something because that's the cash they generate, they will never change because you're taking their cash away. It's like the panda. Don't take my bamboo. If you take my bamboo, I'll die. I mean, wonderful. So what we're doing is every time we say, where is the cash? So here is an initiative to turn an island self-sufficient in water and energy as a basic strategy to turn the whole agriculture organic. And by the way, I need 82 million euro, and the population that will be affected is 10,000. What is your reaction? He's nuts. He's absolutely nuts. I mean, is he going to find a billionaire to fund this, or how is this being funded? You know, it's quite amazing because what we do have is that this community is spending 9 million on imported fuel every year. Can we do the calculus? I do an investment of 82 million. It is good for 40 years. Just with 9 years of fuel, I paid off. And 31 years net cash flow. Are we in business? The money is guaranteed to be spent on the fuel. We just substitute the fuel for something renewable. And the whole world thinks that I'm nuts? No, the world is nuts. Because we think it's absolutely normal to spend that money on fuel. So we've done it. The island had no water, no jobs, no food, no mobility, and lived off subsidies. What happens when a community lives off subsidies? I call it corruption. Guaranteed corruption. Politicians who are there to just give the money gives corruption. And no transparency. So what's the result? The island is now self-sufficient. It has a wind park, has a very interesting engineering system of hydro combined. But the business model is the following. We merged the electric company with the water company. Contrary, again, to what logic is today. Why? Because if I'm a power company and you need water, I can negotiate with you like hell. Because I know that if you don't get my power, you have no water. If you have no water, people leave the island. So I'm never going to get water produced at marginal cost of power, unless I merge the two. So we merge the two, alignment of interest, which is the people, right? Could we take the people as priority for a change? And so the priority is clearly aligned. So first, we produce electricity, put it on the grid. Second, you produce electricity, too much, pump the water up. Third, you have electricity left over, create drinking water at marginal cost, 1 cent kilowatt hour. Do we agree this is good business? Makes sense? How come we don't do that? We needed this little island to do that. And in order to do the storage, for those of you who are interested in the engineering of this, We store power in flywheels. No batteries. Why don't I want to use batteries? Because if you're in a salt environment, you don't want batteries. Whatever the label says, guaranteed for 5 years, is not going to work. Every engineer knows that. But still, we keep on promoting batteries everywhere. Why don't you promote flywheels? Vacuum-based flywheels. Couldn't find manufacturers. So, small Austrian company is now the lead producer of flywheels. When our American experts came to see this, they said, but there's a problem here. You have no batteries. When you switch from hydro to wind, you will have a blackout. Sir, they're the flywheels. Flywheels. Yeah, we have 15 megawatt flywheel capacity. Engineers in the room? Who has seen 15 megawatt flywheel operating on a little island serving 10,000 people? We even have 3 patents on it. This is innovation. But this is using what you have. Now, the next phase is that we're going to change all the cars to electric cars. And it costs 120 million. And the same message comes. Too expensive. No, they're spending 9 million on fuel again. And the 9 million on fuel, and what is our business model? The business model is that the electricity company, which is, by the way, in the meantime, owned by 65% of the local population, the electric company buys the battery. So now you do the leasing of an electric vehicle without the battery. Because if you have 6,000 batteries, you can do a smart grid management on your island. But you can't use the batteries of Renault because Renault has a little technological lock-in with the nuclear power industry. So the Renault batteries, you can only charge and you can never do smart grid. Ah, interesting. There are only 2 companies that make electric cars that allow you to do smart grid management. The other ones have a technological institutional lock-in. So that is the Nissan Leaf and the Tesla. So we have bought the first 25 Nissan Leafs. I'm sorry, Tesla, the price is still a bit too high. But what is important for you to know? What's the business model behind it? We're doing a car leasing without the battery, and the car leasing is only for 10 years, not shorter. Typical car leasing agreements is 3 to 5, never 10. But I want to reduce consumption, don't we? We should have less material consumption. So we do it over 10 years. People pay 165 euro per month, and they have the car, the fuel, and the insurance. And 4,000 euro cash down, but if you give your old car, we guarantee 4,000 euro cash down. With no money, you shift. We think it'll be done in 4 years' time. And in the 165, we have the capital built in order to expand the production capacity of power. This is business in practice. This is how we run it. And this is functioning. I mean, we have a multiplier effect. Now, how I'm talking as an economist. I'm trained as an economist. I'm talking about multiplier effects in the economy. We want to grow the economy, right? I mean, if we want to grow it, we have now double the amount of water at half the price. Everything is renewable energy. We only have organic farming. 53 new farms have been introduced in the last 2 years. And you know why? Because we're able to pay the farmer €2.40 per liter of milk. You know how much the European Union subsidized pays? 30 cents. We go times 8. You think farmers are interested times 8? I guarantee you, every goat that goes to bed at night gets a kiss before it goes to sleep. Because for €2.40, I mean, you change the complete business model. And we forget that this is part of my main message. You want to have sustainable manufacturing. You're going to have a supply chain that starts from the farm. That is just from the farm. If it ain't just from the farm, we are not having a sustainable chain. That's what I learned with my Ecover. I need to start there. I need to have it in practice. So ladies and gentlemen, we have to change the business model. It's hard for many of the people in the business to accept that all these MBAs have now a little date on the diploma. It's the expiration date. Diplomas, for me, have expiration dates. They're not useful anymore. I mean, we do it with food, right? How is it possible that the same courses that I took in the 1970s are still taught to my son in the year 2000s and 10s? How is it possible? Samuelson is still being taught. Don't we realize a few things have changed in the meantime? Anyway, this is the business model I want to talk to you about. It's from the farmer to your end product. And let me tell you about some of the stupidities that we've built up and we think they're normal in modern life. We don't even realize it's unjust. This is the official picture of Mongolia to entice you to come and visit. You go to Mongolia, and what is Mongolia famous of? 60% of the production of cashmere in the world comes from Mongolia. Why? Well, because these goats, they roam freely around in the wintertime at -40, and that's how that little hair gets produced. That's why wool can't do it, that's mohair can't do it. The only competition is vicuña, and they also live at 3,000 meters in the cold. That means you have to have people who go along with that. Would you like to be candidate for a lifetime career in herding goats so you can have cashmere, which the market pays you $5 a kilo? How much do you pay for your cashmere sweater? Don't tell me no one has a cashmere sweater here. Huh? I just don't want to admit it. But that's the animal. It's a beautiful animal. But if you buy your cashmere sweater over the internet, you know that PayPal gets as much as the herder of the sheep. What? Yeah. PayPal earns the equivalent of $5 a kilogram. We don't do these calculations. Now, if you want to talk about injustice in the world, it's not because I have anything against the people of PayPal, but I think the system is insane that the man who has to work as a herder earns as much as the one who secures the payment. Do you understand why I'm arguing for a new business model? So what is the message from the market? Cashmere is popular. Demand increases. Demand increases means more goats. More goats means desertification. That's the real picture of Mongolia. Because if you double the number of goats, you got more desert. So what is the model we're proposing? Let me get down to business right away. The model is very practical. In order to get the farmer to be interested in sustainability, I am saying here is a great designer from Spain called Sibila, and she does a special line of cashmere products, and she only sells in pop-up stores. You know the pop-up stores. You have pop-up sessions as well, I hear. 2 months in New York, 2 months in Milan, 2 months in Tokyo, 2 months in Madrid. Pop-up stores only, with limited numbers. And the commitment is that 10% of the price paid cash, no internet payments, cash only, goes to the farmer. You know how much the farmer now gets per kilo? $120 a kg. What is the reaction of a farmer when he's getting 120 kilograms? I can do with half of the goats, right? When half of the goats is only roaming the land, what happens to supply of cashmere? It drops. What's the signal we get from the market? Price goes up. The farmer says, and now I'll even produce less. Isn't this nice? We have a business model that signals the wrong information because we pay global prices. The market establishes. Excuse me for the words, but I respond to this. Bullshit. You make a small shift in the business model, and instead of going for a commodity, you give a commission. You change the market system immediately. And that is decided by whom? By us. We decide. That is not decided by government politicians. The European Union has nothing to see with that. Neither David Cameron. It's totally separate from politics. It is a decision to move. And so I've been working for years now on getting these business models operational. Because if we don't get the farmer to get 6 times more, 10 times more, then we are going to destroy the land. And then we're going to believe that GMO is the salvation. GMO is a joke. GMO can never do 15 times more for the farmer. May we talk about the farmer for a moment, not about those who invest with hedge funds into GMO? May we talk about the people who care for the land? May they be part of our resilient business model to get to a sustainable future? Or are we deciding that we're in manufacturing, they're just supplying? We need to shift that thinking. And so here we are in Kaziranga. Who has been to Kaziranga, India? Fantastic. You're from India, of course. Do you know Kaziranga? Well, Kate and Willie were just there a couple months ago. You know, didn't you follow the news? Kaziranga is the largest natural park for wild Asian elephants, the largest park for wild Asian rhinos and tigers. And it's stuck between Myanmar, China, and the northeast of India. And you have an incredible environment, but next to it is a tea plantation owned by a family called Tata. Small family, you've come across it certainly in India here, you know, in England here and there. So the Tata family owns it, and Mr. Ratan Tata personally decided 8 years ago that when he realized all the chemicals flushing from his tea plantation into the park, he said, we have to go organic. So this is the largest tea plantation in the world that has gone organic. It has all the paraphernalia to dry, to pack, and all of that. But when you go organic and you don't have your topsoil rich in carbon, production drops 75%, as they did. And I said, we have a problem. I said, no, you don't have a problem. You have no more carbon. The issue is carbon. But in the meantime, Mr. Ratan Tata left the day-to-day management to Cyril, and Cyril is an MBA. He worked for McKinsey. So what is he focusing on? Cost cutting. I mean, what else would he be worried about? I mean, it's the only thing that makes sense to someone who has an MBA and worked for McKinsey. Of course, you will have an institute that talks about circular economy, but hey, that's just the foundation, right? It's not where you do business. Business you do with the real stuff. So here comes Pauli and his team. And we're saying, if that's the tea, and you need the trees to provide a canopy so that you protect the tea from the sun, let's plant pepper vines. Yeah, we have the pepper vines. Every tree is going to go for pepper vines. What's the result? You know how fast vines grow? So within a year, we increased turnover by 20%. Not with tea, but with the pepper growing on the trees that protect the tea. Systems thinking. Use what nature provides. And then you have to prune, you have to cut the bushes. You don't cut the bushes, you don't have tea next year. You know that the volume of hardwoods, because tea is a hardwood, the volume of hardwoods that you have is 5 times more than the volume of the tea leaves. And what do we do with that? We farm mushrooms in it. We doubled the turnover in 1 year and 6 months. We doubled the turnover with what the tea plantation has. What is the big struggle? What's the core business? Tea. Where is the cash flow coming from? Mushrooms and pepper. So what are you now deciding? No, we're in the tea business. No, you're in the cash flow business. Think cash flow. Stop behaving panda. You know, and this is really where we're looking at. My son knows how to grow mushrooms at the age of 3. So if my son can do it, everyone can do it. So let's not get into the technicalities of core competences, because normally they say core business, core competence. Well, core competence, my son gets it at the age of 3, so why would you worry about it? Let's just do it. But what is important is that the whole structure of tea is drying and packaging. That industrial infrastructure applies to pepper and mushrooms as well. No capital investment, throughput times 2. This is business. This is securing not only the business, but what is the worst is that now we have launched Hatikuli organic tea, because normally the tea goes into the supply chain management. Have you heard that word before? Global supply chain? I mean, gosh, what another oxymoron that was invented. It goes into this global supply chain so that the tea from the north of Assam is blended with tea from Sri Lanka, from Argentina, from Kenya, and so you have the average taste that pleases most of the British consumers. That means you're pleased, they don't earn money. So we're creating the own brand, Hatikuli. For the first time, Tata Global Beverage Services is having a separate brand. Why? Because we generate 21 times more value. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, could we talk cash flow? Instead of worrying about core business and core competences. We're generating 2,000 jobs. What does it mean when you have 2,000 extra jobs? You eliminate poaching. I mean, could we include poaching into new business models? I mean, that's normally not part of the strategic committee's decisions or even considerations. But this is where we need to go to. We need to shift the way we think, and so let me get a bit more technical. Here is coffee. That's the coffee bean, that's the waste on the farm, and that's what you get at your coffee shop. All of that is wasted. All of it. We give value to 0.2%. Now, if we want to increase, I mean, minus 30, you can have 500 times more production with an existing 10 million ton produce called coffee by simply using what you have. I mean, anyone in GMO ever offered you times 500? No. And we don't need anything but realizing that we can use this. And my daughter, Chido, who's here talking to women in Zimbabwe, my daughter is from Zimbabwe. When Chido talks to these women and says, look, you're farming coffee on that waste from the coffee that you have that is being thrown away, that creates methane gas and stinks like hell, on that waste you can farm mushrooms, and within 3 to 6 weeks you will have food security. You know what these women do? They get up, they sing, and they dance. And they do it. You know what they need in Europe? A business plan. A strategic assessment. A technology audit. A commission to approve. A research project. A pilot. And as a result, we do nothing. This is le mal de l'Europe. Europe has gotten stuck in its procedures, and if we want to get onto a sustainable track, we have to do again this. 4 legs, 2, run, get food, do it. It's the only way to move about. And then when you're doing it, let's get the scientists in and see how we're doing it. We're having today more than 3,000 farms around the world doing this. And what is the reaction of the people? Fantastic. What is my reaction? What a disaster. It should be 25 million farms. 10 million tons of coffee and 15 million tons of tea can produce 25 million tons of protein at no cost but labor, because all the raw materials are available. Why are we not doing this? Because when I was presenting to the board of Nestlé, the board, including its chairman, said, fantastic, this is really extraordinary. But Professor Pauli, we're not in the mushroom business. We're in the coffee business. You will have opportunities to get into sustainable manufacturing provided that the corset we have put all engineers in is released. You have to cut the corset of core business. So now we have coffee, we drink it. From the waste we farm mushrooms. The waste of the coffee after farming the mushrooms is enriched with protein. It's great chicken feed. If you don't have chickens, give it to your dog, also likes it. Now we blend coffee, 6% in polyethylene, to make fibers for outdoor clothing that absorbs odors. Because even grandma knew that if there's a fall odor in your refrigerator, what do? Put in coffee beans. So we said, why don't we put it into textiles? Patagonia, Nike, Hugo Boss, they're all buying. We can't follow with manufacturing. We're making master badges. For those of you who are in chemistry and manufacturing, we're making master badges with color pigments blended in coffee. So we have to get the coffee to 2 micron, and we mix it with the master badges, and it goes straight into manufacturing. What's the cost price of coffee? After you have drunk the coffee. Whatever. What's the cost of a functional chemical that is giving an odor absorption? $3,000, $4,000 a ton? So we're valuing our coffee at half that price. Now we're mixing it in Island 6. But in Island 6, it doesn't work with the grain, it works only with the oil. But if you have instant coffee manufacturing, then 20% of the waste from instant coffee manufacturing is actually coffee oil, We extract the oil with supercritical CO2 extraction, which is exactly the same machine they use today for extracting the soluble part of the coffee to make instant coffee, which, by the way, is Nestlé, is the biggest producer in the world. And they still claim that the best use of the waste is burn it. Excuse us, gentlemen, we can sell it for $4,000 a ton in Island 6. Interface is doing it now. I mean, you have carpets absorbing odors. We can go beyond it. Now MDI, in order to make polyurethane, we can blend 20% coffee oil into MDI. Now the dashboards of your car, the first one will be the BMW 7 Series, will be made with 20% coffee oil in order to absorb the odor that every new car has, which always bothers people when they get into the car, which is basically the off-gassing of all the chemicals they've used everywhere else. We will capture it into the dashboard. With what? With coffee. This is the new chemistry. And we know exactly how to put it into the system. We can now blend coffee oil into paint. We blend it into paint, and don't worry, the color is not going to be brown forever. We can take that little color pigment out. I mean, engineers, the beauty with engineers is you say what you want, they can do it. I mean, engineers always find a solution. It's the business modeling people who are stuck in their mind. So therefore, if you have an innovative project, ask first who has an MBA. Those who have an MBA, ask them to leave the room and have a cup of coffee while you're doing strategic discussions. Because this is the reality. Why do we put coffee oil into paint? Because coffee oil is UV resistant. That's what we do with titanium oxides today. We're eliminating titanium oxide substituted with a coffee oil, which is available for free, extracted with the same machinery they already have. Ladies and gentlemen, could we be more sustainable? Why not? And then today, the greatest innovation, you've maybe seen the article in February this year in Nature, that we can store hydrogen in coffee grounds. Of course it is not efficient as fuel cells, but the fuel cells need platinum. We only need coffee. Can we get into this? Batteries, storage systems based on coffee. We have 10 million a year, tons. Could we imagine a way to reduce mining of titanium, lithium? Could we imagine that? Could we take a holistic view and see how the system is operating and how we are making decisions on batteries that will destroy Bolivia? Because we don't worry about the supply chain from the mines, right? That's not our problem. We just do future options. We just start gambling on the market and we say we take options for 5 years on lithium. And when these options are going to give the prices that we know that it will give them, then people will get funded to destroy 3,000-meter high lakes in Bolivia that are full of the 70% of the lithium that's around the world. So we need, as engineering, as business modelers, we need to know what we're doing. I know what I did wrong. I thought I was sustainable with my palm oil as a biodegradable ingredient. We have to include it. You don't include it, you are making massive collateral damage. And once you know you're doing collateral damage, you should be tried in court. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what United Nations says. Collateral damage is creating damage. You know you're killing, you're destroying, you know you're doing it. Industry, I think, will be judged by our children in a very harsh way, because industry today is creating a lot of collateral damage. And we don't have the ethics yet to see it that way. But I think we're going to have a new generation that has that ethics. Be prepared. Value generation on the coffee, ×7. In the coffee region in Colombia, Lejo Cafetero, hay colombianos aquí. Anyone from Colombia? Exceptionally not. Normally they're all over the Colombian here. In the coffee region, we generated 15,000 jobs with this approach. What does jobs mean in that region? It means less criminality, less crime. Are we interested in less crime? The only way to do it is change. I mean, we have to look at the system. We can't just have statistics look at one thing and business look at another thing. We have to change the models around. And we need an absolute new supply chain for food. I mean, our bread, our meat, our milk, our preserves. We have to rethink the way we're making all of that. And it starts from the base. And the base, like we're trying to do with this company Poult in France, which is the largest cookie maker. What is a cookie made of? It's full of gluten. It's full of sugar. It's full of palm oil. I mean, hey, could we do a little bit design effort? I mean, do you really want to intoxicate kids and only vilify Coca-Cola? I mean, they're as bad, huh? We really need to redesign the way cookies are being served or the way bread is being made. Bread today has nothing to see with what bread was. If you're having a sourdough, don't ever think it is a sourdough. If it has the taste of a sourdough, it has been produced with bovine enzymes from its blood. And somehow they got an exception because this is going to be baked, right, at 180 degrees, so therefore no prying risks. If you want crispy bread, then it is made with enzymes from animals. Oh, that is not on the label. No, because whatever is less than 1%, we don't have to put on the label. We don't need to know. Do you like the idea of oven-fresh bread, which basically means deep-frozen bread, recently unfrozen, that in order to be crispy has an enzyme that is from a cow's blood that was slaughtered? Do you like that idea? Somehow it's on the internet, but somehow you don't know. Because the internet is as core business as the corporations are. It doesn't link anything. It only gives you 1 million responses to one question and only the same response. If you want to know how does the apple fall down from the tree, you have more than 50 million responses. If you want to know how did the apple get up in the tree before subjecting itself to the law of gravity, 0 responses. How is that possible? And then we rely on the internet as being the smart information network? Excuse me, gentlemen. The internet is a waste of time for most of us. So let's get back to bread. Here we are in Mexico. Guacamole. I think you know in England, you now know what guacamole is, right? Just in Monterrey, I'm teaching at the Monterrey Institute of Technology, Mexico, not California. I'm teaching, and we found out there's 70,000 tons of seeds of avocado from the guacamole, only in Monterrey. Today, we process those seeds into additives for bread. Not because I'm against the bovine thing, I think we have better. What's the cost price of a seed from an avocado? They pay you to take it. Now, how often are you in a supply chain system where they pay you to take it? We don't create markets where there is intermediation. We create direct B2B, business-to-business relationships. So, sea worms. I promised you I'd talk about the sea. What are sea worms good for? I mean, you've seen that, right? When you walk on the beach. These are sea worms, hiding, waiting for the next water to come. They breathe. But when the water comes over them, they actually have been around for 550 million years, but they are probably the inventors of hemoglobin. What does hemoglobin do in our body? Hemoglobin stores oxygen. I mean, that's what we need. Now, here you have a Brit who's farming them. But this is where the important revolution is happening. A sea worm is capable of storing 150 times more oxygen in hemoglobin than we can do. Who is in food business here? Who's interested in the food business, fermentation processes? Who is in medicine? If you have a source of hemoglobin times 150, what are you doing to transplants of organs? You just extended the life of a kidney to 2 days instead of the 3 hours or 4 hours for a transplant. Instead of using helicopters, now you can just use with normal transport. You can ask DHL to deliver it. What does it mean for beer brewing? It means in beer brewing that we can brew 100 times faster. without the GMO enzymes you're using today, which cannot do it that fast. Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to hammer on that. There's just been a declaration from our famous 110 Nobel laureates against Greenpeace saying that stop bashing GMO. No, start celebrating nature solutions. I mean, why do we want to spend all that money on fiddling around with genes when it's there 150 times? The first factories are being put up. The first factory was in the UK. They got a Queen Export Award. But we're putting up the big factories in Brittany, in Normandy. Because when 1 kilogram of hemoglobin from the sea worm gives us these incredible opportunities, we have only 6 kilograms. That means we have 994 left over. That's a hell of a lot of great feed. That means we can stop fishing the sea to death to get the sardines and anchovies to feed the salmon. The Scots like to farm. And we're saying you don't need to do it. Do it with your sea worms. That's what they usually eat, because they've never eaten sardines before. Are we okay? Are you following? And not even halfway. I have 200 cases like this. Now, I don't know about you. They told me I have maximum 1 hour, so I will have to limit it. But I just want to tell you that this is the transformation that business can do. We increase cash flow. We increase our environmental positive impact. We put nature back on its evolutionary path. To farm a sea worm, what do you need? Seawater, sand, and a bit of brewery waste. Do you think in England they have brewery waste? Instead of giving it to the pigs, why don't you give it to the sea worms? The pig farmer doesn't pay anyone to get it. The sea worm gives me a value per kilogram of $150,000 because I'm preserving organs. Ladies and gentlemen, this is business, huh? This is purely natural. And I think this is what we forget. In our supply chain, we as people, as human beings, we believe that the physics and the biology is our domain. No, it's nature's domain. Nature has done it for 4 billion years. How do we pretend with our shrinking brain that we're going to be able to do better? And on top of that, it's a shrinking brain, right? So, we're going to have rising sea levels. The engineers think that we have to do this. Build dikes, walls. I've lived 27 years in Japan. We've learned the hard way with the last tsunami that dikes and walls don't do anything. And there are very simple laws of physics. 1 cubic meter of water is 1 ton, right? So how are you going to engineer against that? Ebb and tide is 7 to 8 meters. You see it coming up, and then it keeps on rising, and keeps on rising, keeps on banging, keeps on banging. So who of you is doing martial arts? What's the trick of martial arts? If you have a big power coming at you, you're not going to do this. It doesn't work. You have to take the power and go against its own force. And that is what we're doing. We are basically regenerating now mangroves, and we're building off we have the first interest to build a lot of little islands so that when the tide is coming, it's all deflected. And it creates vortices the other way. That's Aikido, that is Judo, that's Ippon. Boom on the floor because why use your force? This is the way things work. So here is a project we've implemented in Indonesia. Shrimp farms, as you know, all died 75%. First the tsunami came, and what was not destroyed by the tsunami was destroyed by a white spot virus. Because when you don't have the ecosystem protecting your system, then of course you're going to have viruses attacking. Monocultures are breeding grounds for viruses. And the response is not antibiotics, the response is regenerate your biodiversity. So here you see how in Indonesia, old systems that have been destroyed, we replant the mangroves, we have channels in between, we put in the nets, and guess what we have in the nets? Shrimps. What's the beauty? We don't have to farm them. We don't have to feed them. What's the other beauty? If you have the shrimps, then you have the crabs. You like crabs? We don't have to feed the crabs. We don't have to feed the shrimps. Do you think we're competitive? What is our cost price? Regenerating mangroves. Unfortunately, business is not teaching students how to plan this way. But this way works. We have 83 hectares in Surabaya in Indonesia. 7 different varieties have been done. But what we can do is those new mangroves, we can chop the top off so that they grow deeper in the roots, and now we have feed for the goats. I know the goats can be a problem if they don't feed them well, but mangroves is a reverse osmosis system. That means the fresh leaves give me fresh water. That means I don't have to provide water anymore. I can take away a lot of the engineering that normally used to be done. And now we're feeding the goats with this plus some aloe vera, because mangrove alone is not good enough. So we have an aloe vera plantation. Supply chain needs to be secured from the bases up. We have shrimps without feeding them, but the sea levels are still rising, so now we're starting to farm rice in seawater paddies. Have you heard of that? I don't know why it's like before. Why don't we get the good news? Why don't we get the good news? Because now when the rising sea levels are encroaching, instead of the 1 meter, we still have 200 centimeters that comes in, and that means that we're now using the natural hybrid of salt-resistant rice, which was discovered in China. I mean, it gives you an incredible opportunity, and now we're moving to 3D sea farming. You know, when I was talking 20 years ago about integrated sea farming or integrated biosystems, people said, oh, interesting. And then one day, it struck me that when you'd say 3D sea farming, people say, wow, that's interesting. How do you do that? So the marketing guys are right. Sometimes you have to find the exact word to stimulate interest. Integrated biosystems, no one interested. 3D, all engineers interested. And basically what we're doing is we're creating these floating systems where we have the seaweeds, the mussels, the scallops, we have all the crustaceans there, we have the sea sponges, and then on the bottom we have the oysters. Do you know that between Scotland, England, Belgium, Netherlands, and Denmark, there was 20,000 square kilometers of oysters? We've eaten them all and never bothered about planting them again. We're now creating in the North Sea, it may take a generation, and maybe it will take longer than I will live, but we're working on the concessions to do 100 square kilometers of 3D sea farming in the North Sea. Why? We need to get good food again. We need to have the biosystem, the ecosystem regenerated, and you start with the pioneer species. But what is the engineering behind it is the rope system. We have an incredible new rope system that is actually promoting the attachment of the seaweeds. Today it's all manual, you know, you need to attach them. Now the rope attracts it naturally. So the engineering solution we found there is extraordinary. Now what is the seaweed good for? 100 square kilometer seaweed farm will generate massive methane gas. So we make the business plan work with the methane gas. We have the shellfish on top of it. We grow it without feeding them. And we build a whole new supply chain for the industry. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what it's about. Can we build up a new supply chain for industry? Yes or no? Yes. Do we think petroleum comes to an end? Yes. Do we want healthier food? Yes. So this is what we're working on. Our 100 square kilometer sea farms, which are based on 10 hectare platforms that you can float in the ocean instead of having to anchor them. Another one crazy idea is we want to anchor everything in the ocean so we can nicely destroy the bottom. No, let them float. This is how everything works in nature. To put in a little GPS, of course, so you know which one is floating where. So what we're now having is, though, that thanks to these 6 products that we have in one 3D farm, we have fertilizer, animal feeds, food products, cosmetics, pharmaceuticals, and energy. At a cost which is below the cost price of Aramco's petroleum delivered in Saudi Arabia. Seaweed is an Irish thing, right? Why do you only make soap? Why don't they make textiles out of it? We got the first textile factory that's completely based on seaweed. Or are you sticking with cotton? Cotton which consumes, for every ton of cotton, you need 2,000 tons of water. Doesn't make any sense. What is the result? We generate $75,000 per hectare. Ladies and gentlemen, how many farmers do you know that earn $75,000 per hectare? None. But it's 3D. Normal farming is 2D. It's normal you earn more money. Why don't we teach that at university, is my question. 15,000 new jobs, new industries. Let's talk about paper. I have only 2 cases left. Is that okay? Paper is one of these insanities that we think is normal. I mean, if I explain to a child of 5 years old that the paper you're writing on, for 1 ton, we needed to cut 20 trees and we needed to use 60 tons of water. Child doesn't understand why, because we're now using the waste of mines. Do you have a bit of waste of coal mines in England here and there? You know, some people think it's even nice to look at. I wonder what kind of a brainwash that was. Some want to make tourist spots out of it. I'm sorry, dig it away. Do something with it. We're turning mining waste into raw material for paper. We grind it to 3 to 5 micron. We blend it with recycled PET bottles. Do you think we have a few extra here and there? PET bottles, plastic bottles? At least I'm very glad here. It's a glass bottle, so thank you, Steve. That was a good decision. But this is converted to stone paper. When I presented that in Europe for the first time 12 years ago, I had the same reaction as I get when I say we need 82 million for 10,000 people. You're nuts. Sure, I'm nuts. But stone paper is a reality. Here's the first factory. Today, we've completely rethought the way that paper is made. No cellulose, no water, recyclable forever, and when you recycle, no need to de-ink. Oh, I hope you don't have a center for research on paper, because that's all expiration date today. Why do these guys not change? Because they have invested in millions of hectares of eucalyptus and pine trees. And they think they should have that not written off. So we're blocked out of the markets in Europe by this famous institutional technological system. So we're saying, who cares? This is not the growth market. With or without Brexit, this is no future. We'll go to China. So in China, we have 4 factories. Every year, we add a factory. Chinese government has decided that if there's no trees used and no water used, why debate it? On top of that, what's the cost price of the raw material? Mining waste. You get paid to take it. You think we're competitive? We're half price from paper and still have a 35% return on investment. What's the ROI of a paper company today? If you're 3–4% range, you're good. So why do you want to change? Why is Europe not ready to change? Well, we'll see. But the 678,000 tons capacity, and now those of you who are in engineering and manufacturing, 4 years ago we had 18,000 tons. 4 years ago. We're now at 678,000 tons. By 2024, we will have 25 million tons. Where? China. Very simple. Europe doesn't want to move? Don't move. I go somewhere else. I don't want to convince the Europeans. I just want to share that the investors in this process are all mining companies, coal mining companies. I do understand that when there is a call from the Director General of the Ministry of Industry and Energy to a mining company and says, we'd like to suggest that you invest in this, in China, they invest. You know, there's something special about this Communist Party that has a capacity to convince with logic. I mean, no water, raw materials for free, recyclable forever. Is there anything wrong with this? Is this hard-handed? No, it is not accepting the technological institutional lock-in. And that is what is very important. We're saving 40 million tons of water, and energy consumption goes down. Because we're not floating water anymore. Water with 1% fibers. So we look at the industrial process that is there today, how could you ever make it sustainable? You can't. It will always be stealing less. It will never be doing more good. And that is what we need. That's an ethical thing. Are we prepared at universities to ask ethical questions? The ethical question is, can we justify cutting trees, taking millions of hectares of land where we're depleting the topsoil, where we could have food on, in order to maintain the locked-in interests of the paper and pulp industry? Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, may we ask that ethical question? And I guarantee you, when I'm with kids, that is not a question anymore. And so therefore, we need to think differently. But here comes the engineering question. Aren't stones heavier than cellulose? Yes, it is. So, well, that's why we needed to do research and we needed to invent a new formulation. What would you do when you have something that's too heavy? Engineers, please tell me, what would you add in order to make it lighter? Air, exactly. So that's what we do. We blend it with air. What's the cost price of air? Ladies and gentlemen, are we together on this? Do you need an engineer now to do you need a consulting company to do a technology audit? Do you need a commission to be established, or are we ready to invest in the factory? We have invested in the factory. The factory we established, what will the factory do? It will produce all the school books for every child in China. Well, the market is 340 million school kids, so it's a bit of an interesting market. And after 3 years of having the books go simply back to the factory and are remolded back into paper. Same book. Who is an accountant in this room? No accountants. You think I'm going to pick on you, and therefore you're not raising your hand. From an accounting point of view, if the book is sold and the paper is then recycled by someone else, what does it do to me? Nothing. It's a cost. Paper is a cost. What is in the accounting measure when the book is sold, but the paper is guaranteed to come back to you? What does it do to your balance sheet? It's activated. You know what it means? I build up my balance sheet as I supply more. Wow, that's interesting. Most companies' balance sheet is a bit lousy these days. A bit over-leveraged, right? You change the business model, you take everything back. I mean, that's a nice proposal. That's what we're doing in China. The publishers will take everything back, and they will be able, by a new regulation, they will not have to calculate it as a cost. It is an asset. And since it's mineral, it does not degrade. The beauty of minerals is it doesn't degrade. Fibers degrade. 5, 6, 7, 8 times used, it's over. Minerals, 2,000 years. No problem. 5,000 years. This is what physics tells us. That's why in my book I insist that physics is more important than chemistry and biology. So new life for assets. My last case. Maybe you know I'm chairman of this company. I have to declare my interests publicly. I'm chairman of a company that is the largest biopolymer producer in Europe. And our main raw material is thistles. Do you have thistles in England? Scotland particularly, yeah. So what's wrong with a thistle? We think it's a weed. So what do? We take the weed and we process it into polymers, lubricants, elastomers, and herbicides. For those of you in chemistry, we're producing pelargonic esters and we're producing azelaic esters. We're producing isobutandiol. We're producing the basic blocks of chemistry from thistles. Why thistles? Well, because the European Union has this incredible policy which is paying farmers not to farm. When you pay farmers not to farm, what do you get? Thistles. So there are 20 million hectares of land in Europe that have been taken out of farming and that are full of thistles. We thought it was a great opportunity to transform it. But 20% of our product is a waste. That waste is now animal feed. Interesting. Polymer factory has a waste that becomes an animal feed. We can sell animal feed with the same proteinic content as soy for half the price. Welcome to the world of competition and globalization. This is the globalization I enjoy. This is the real one. When you are David, and let's respect the reality of the world, Europe versus China and India is David. You're not Goliath. If you recognize the fact that you're David, you behave like David. You don't pretend you're Goliath. And David wins, provided you change the rules of the game. When David would have gone out there to wrestle with Goliath, we know history would have changed, right? But the trick of Goliath was, the trick of David was that he shifted to throwing stones without telling Goliath. That's what business strategy is all about. Business strategy is not about publicizing what we're going to do, it's to do it. Just focus on doing. Scrap all the social media. Scrap all the likes you think you want to get. Just focus on doing things. Spend all the money. And then we had this incredible visit from an old lady who knocked at our doors and said, "Are you really going to process thistles?" I said, "Yeah, we are." Have you seen that little dust, that white stuff that is on the flower? And we said, "No, we didn't see that." And she said, "Well, could you get me some?" So our engineers had a look at it, and we ended up having 2,000 tons of it. This is the bacterial enzyme with which you make goat cheese. We're the largest producer of enzymes now in Italy. We didn't know. Nature has its surprises. We outcompete Novozymes, laughing. Because what is our cost price? None. It just happens to be there. We just now know we have to do like this. Of course, now we have machines doing like this. But you see, from the engineering point of view, what has happened. No one has designed a refinery for thistles, right? I mean, have you ever heard of that? You Google and you want a chemist specialized in thistle chemistry. Even Google can't find you anyone. What is the result? That today we have 1,200 patents. 1,200 patents on biorefineries. Because everyone is focusing on petrochemical refineries. It's fun to do this. It gives you a lot of joy. So we're cheese producers, we didn't know. But the most important is we're doing this at the old petrochemical facility of E&I in Porto Torres, Sardinia. We didn't build a new plant. We took the old plant and we converted it to a new one. Ladies and gentlemen, we can take stranded assets. Now, this is industrial engineering for sustainability. This is real stuff. Kallenborg looks like this. Because what is possible now is that we only have to deploy only 20% of the capital investment to get to the same production capacity as petroleum does, because we use what is there. It's still good to have an MBA sometimes. You can make these calculations. But the difference is that now the calculations are so blunt and so obvious, you can do it on the back of an envelope and you don't need to use Excel spreadsheets. You don't need Excel spreadsheets. This is so obvious. We raised the 840 million euro for this in 3 weeks. Are we transforming the economy? Not in the rest of the world, but at least this new plantation, this new system. We have 8 factories in Italy. Sorry, 6 factories in Italy now. 6 factories in Italy. We're transforming the chemical industry of Italy. We hope to take out all the crackers. We will make the crackers useless. Why? Because there's so much raw material available from farms and from weeds that we can actually do this. That is where our engineers have to focus on. And that is where great opportunities are emerging. And this is our hero, my hero, Katia Bastioli. Katia is the CEO. And as CEO, She actually was working for Montedison. When Montedison went bankrupt, she took over the laboratory on biopolymers. And we've created this new industry. She has created it. Everything we do is always translated in a systems dynamics mathematical model. Business plans and Excel spreadsheets are actually prohibited in our organization. We don't want to see them. But we have teams that work together, so for every single initiative, we build up between 3,000 and 5,000 equations, and we model. We understand all what is happening related to these type of initiatives. Be it a seaworm, or be it a thistle, or be it the reuse of an old petrochemical facility. What we need to do is get back to mathematics. We're not forcing mathematics sufficiently. We're forcing statistics on our students. So we can have these famous curves, and we can do, everything that what we do today in order to be scientific. We focus 100% on mathematical modeling. The system dynamics done by MIT. J. Forrester, 1964. We use the same models. They are incredibly effective to show the resilience of systems, to show the multiple benefits, and we derive from it the multiple cash flows. And when we derive multiple cash flows, it's very easy to find investors. We mobilized $4 billion in investments the last 5 years without business plans. How is that possible? How is it possible? Because we show with the business models who earns what, when, where, and how the resilience is. What can we take out? Imagine 1, 2, 3 is not working, 4, 5, 6 continues. Where are the business models? When you go with that to family offices, not to hedge funds, to family offices, you get investments right away. We're doing one training a year, where we introduce people to how we get these projects funded. The big problem is people don't understand, where does the money come from? The money comes from business models that are translated into system dynamics, mathematics. And if anyone has a question, it is not audited, we discuss the equations. The underlying equations is what really is the logic of doing a good business, resilient in society, taking environment, social impacts, geopolitics, all is taken into account. And that is what, to me, is very important. That was my book, The Blue Economy. It's now Blue Economy 2.0 for lack of more creative titles. It's been translated now in 39 languages, 1.2 million copies sold. And it's quite amazing what has been happening the last few years. But I want to go back to my first book on these issues was done with Fritjof Capra. Who knows Fritjof Capra? So, 1995, this was our original book, Steering Business Towards Sustainability. And we always have to go back to our origins, and we always have to remind ourselves that whatever you heard, don't you please ever think Gunter did it all on his own. Never. I'm very privileged to have a very broad group of mentors, who've been challenging me all the time to go beyond. And even if sometimes people think I'm crazy, they even want me to be a bit more crazy. And I want to pay special tribute to Elie Wiesel, who passed away last week, who has been an incredible mentor, particularly on the issues of ethics. If in this presentation I've insisted on ethics, it's because Elie has been very instrumental in making me think that way. Sometimes in these projects, I'm just a fly on the wall, listening, learning. Sometimes I'm like an old bulldozer. Sometimes more looks like this. Sometimes I'm the chef d'orchestre. But we are in need of more people able to work on subjects that we actually don't know anything about. Because if we are not intellectually triggered to work on things we don't know about, we cannot inspire the people who do know. Because we need to get out of our rules of the game. My rule is we have to go for zero emissions. Blue economy is a sublimation of the title zero emissions. In 1994, I was asked by the United Nations to contribute to the Kyoto Protocol. My proposal for the Kyoto Protocol were all refused because I said 0 emissions. Don't trade in certificates. I heard Toyota being mentioned. Well, Toyota was one of my greatest supporters in 1994 in Japan. But we have to move on. We have to move on, and we can not only teach our children what we know. We have to create an incredible freedom to do things we could not imagine ourselves as parents. Just in the last 2 minutes, let me tell you about the elephant. Do you know that the baby elephant loses his teeth as well? Up to 5 times. You tell a child in the tusk fairy, not in the tooth fairy, but in the tusk fairy, you tell the child that the elephants lose their tusks up to 5 times. But somehow we still want to kill the elephants, so we get the old bull's big tusks. Why don't we just pick up what's on the ground? I mean, could you please explain? They're nice and dense and beautiful and white, and then we want to have an old used one that is not so dense and certainly not so white. And we slaughter them, and we tolerate it. And the only response we have is paying armies to protect, just like the panda needs to be protected. We just need to realize that when the kids have the right to have a tooth fairy, the elephants have the right to a tusk fairy. And I'm very fortunate that when it comes to China, my dear friend Yao Ming is one of the greatest supporters. You know Yao Ming, the basketball player, NBA, top guy. So we launched a couple of weeks ago in China the tusk fairy for 10 million Chinese children. You know, the key thing is that we're not going to get the engineers of the future unless we talk to the kids. We have to talk to the kids. Chinese universities will always have an elementary school. Always. We have physically separated everything. I have written 220 fables. Every single thing that we have implemented is translated into a children's story, where we use a language that everyone understands. Because if the kids get it, everyone gets it. But when the kids get excited, the parents get excited. Parents never get excited when I talk about stone paper. They don't believe it. But when this little booklet is printed on stone paper, the kids don't understand why Dad didn't know it's possible to make stone paper. And he's an engineer. What did he do? Where did he study? So I think we're in need of this sandwich of the present power. We need to have the kids pressuring, and we need to make clear that there's a new business model moving. 108 of my stories are published in China and freely distributed in China. Chinese Ministry of Education has decided that this is the way to inspire the kids. We're going to do 365 fables. I have 7 years to finish the job. I will be reaching 340 million kids every day in China. Try to convince a European government to change the school books. I wish you good luck. I'm not even trying. I'm not even trying. But what is important is we have to inspire the next generation. To conclude with the words of Nelson Mandela, it always seemed impossible until it's done. Thank you.
Thank you.